Welcome to another deep dive with us. This time, we're taking a journey into the world of Carl Jung.
Yeah, but we're not, dissecting his theories like we usually do.
Right.
We're going deeper. We're exploring the man himself through his autobiography, memories, dreams, reflections.
And this book, it's especially interesting because Jung, he wasn't a fan of autobiographies.
He really wasn't. Thought a lot of them were just self-deception.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting here is that he only felt this urge, this need to record his memories much later in life. He even describes it as a task laid upon him from within.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, what was so important, so crucial about these specific experiences that he felt like he had to share them with the world?
Right, and it's not your typical autobiography,
Right.
It's not just a timeline of events and dates.
No, it's much more than that.
It's about his inner life, his psychological development.
It's almost like he's trying to, I don't know, like, trace the roots of his own theories?
Yeah, yeah. And he starts right at the beginning, childhood.
And wow, what a childhood it was. Even his earliest memories are pretty striking. There are these recurring themes of, like, death and duality.
I mean, just think about it for a second. One of your very first memories is of a drowned man being pulled from a river.
Yeah.
How could that not have a lasting impact?
It really makes you think, like, did those early encounters with mortality shape Jung's perspective on the psyche? Did they make him realize that maybe it's not all sunshine and rainbows, that there's this, like, inherent darkness that we have to confront?
It's a good question. And then there's this whole two personalities thing that he talks about.
Right.
Personality one he describes as like grounded and practical.
Uh-huh.
But no two, that's where things get interesting.
Totally.
This one's intuitive. It's connected to this hidden world, this other realm.
It almost, I don't know, like, foreshadows his later ideas about the ego and the shadow self.
Right. And we all have those different sides to us.
Hmm.
But Jung, he seemed aware of them from a very early age. And it wasn't just this internal duality either. His childhood, it's full of these unexplained events, near-drowning experiences, sleepwalking, premonitions, all sorts of strange stuff.
It's like those experiences were, like, pulling him toward the mysteries of the unconscious, even as a child.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if we had those kinds of experiences growing up.
Yeah.
Would we end up exploring the same territory?
I mean, talk about shaping your worldview.
Definitely. But things get even wilder when you look at some of the specific dreams Jung describes.
Oh, yeah.
There's one from his childhood that's just so striking. He dreams of a giant, like, disembodied phallus falling from heaven.
Wow.
I know, right? And alongside this, he's wrestling with this fear of committing the unforgivable sin.
That's a lot for a kid to process. It's like he's already grappling with these huge existential questions, the nature of good and evil, the power of symbols.
Exactly. And speaking of religion, this is actually where we start to see Jung's own faith crumbling.
Yeah, he felt really alienated from conventional religion, like it just wasn't providing the answers he was looking for.
Like he was craving something deeper. Do you think that struggle, that disillusionment, was necessary for him to eventually forge his own path?
I mean, it's like he had to break free from those traditional structures to really explore the psyche.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just passive questioning either. He was actively searching, experimenting. Remember that ritual he created with the stone and the wooden mannequin?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Such
Yeah.
a powerful image. It's like he's trying to give form to something, this secret that he feels inside but can't quite grasp.
Yeah.
It's almost like he was foreshadowing his later work with archetypes
Right.
and the way that we project our unconscious onto external symbols. Think about how we try to make sense of things that we can't see or touch through art, music, rituals.
Yeah.
Jung was already doing that as a child.
Okay, so moving on from, like, childhood, we get to the Jung school years. He was a bright kid, obviously excelled in some subjects, but struggles in others, like drawing, for instance.
Yeah. Not everyone fits neatly into those academic boxes, right?
And you know what I think is really interesting?
What's that?
Even though he was so bright, he felt increasingly alienated from the urban world.
Yeah. Like he was finding more solace in nature
Yeah.
and in his father's library.
Exactly. It's almost like he was already sensing that disconnect between the modern world and our, like, deeper, more instinctual selves.
Which is something he writes a lot about later on, right?
It's amazing how those early experiences seem to foreshadow so much of his later work. Oh, and the irony. His classmates nicknamed him Father Abraham.
No way.
I know. It's like his path was laid out for him in some ways, even if he couldn't see it at the time. But then again, isn't there always a choice? Like, do we follow those threads of destiny, or do we create our own paths?
That's a question for all of us to ponder, I think. But in Jung's case, those threads led him to university, and there he found himself drawn to both science and the humanities,
Oh, interesting.
which again reflects that inner dichotomy we've been talking about.
He was trying to bridge that gap between, like, the rational and the irrational, the scientific and the spiritual.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just theoretical for him either. He even delved into the world of spiritualism, attended seances, explored psychic phenomena.
Wow.
But even then, he always remained a critical thinker. He found spiritualism intriguing, but ultimately felt it lacked the scientific rigor he craved.
He was searching for a way to understand the human mind, but it had to be grounded in evidence, in observation.
Exactly.
And that search eventually led him to his true calling. He was reading this psychiatry textbook by Professor Krafft-Ebing, and it's like a light bulb went off. Psychiatry became his path, this way to unite all his diverse interests and that lifelong fascination with the human psyche.
Like everything clicked into place. That flash of illumination, as he called it, was a pivotal moment. It set him on this course that would ultimately shape the field of psychology as we know it. But of course, this is just the beginning of Jung's journey. It's really interesting, as Jung's diving into his psychiatry career, his personal life starts to, well, it kind of mirrors his professional interests.
Like almost as if he was living out the concepts he was exploring.
Exactly. It's pretty wild. He's working with patients, experimenting with hypnosis.
Right?
And at the same time, these bizarre things are happening at home.
You're talking about those like parapsychological events he mentions. It's like something straight out of a ghost story, but we're talking about Carl Jung here.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like that exploding table incident.
Oh, yeah. What was that about?
It happened around the same time his relatives were holding seances.
Seriously. Spooky. Do you think it was just a coincidence?
Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. But it definitely adds another layer to Jung's whole fascination with the unconscious.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder about like the interconnectedness of things, right? Were those external events somehow triggered by his own internal explorations?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
And then there's that case he talks about, the woman he seemingly cured with hypnosis.
Yeah, what happened there?
Well, she ends up coming back, but with a completely different ailment.
Oh, wow.
It just highlights the complexity of psychosomatic illness, doesn't it? It's like a reminder that just treating the symptom might not address the root cause.
Yeah.
Something we forget sometimes in our search for those quick fixes.
Oh, for sure.
And for Jung, it was a lesson in the limitations of those early psychoanalytic techniques.
So then, what, Freud enters the picture?
Right. Jung discovers the interpretation of dreams and boom, it's like this whole new world opens up.
I bet. He must have seen all these connections between Freud's ideas and his own observations.
Exactly. Particularly the concept of repression. That really resonated with him.
But, and this is classic Jung, he wasn't just content with becoming, like, a Freud disciple.
No.
He questioned things, like whether all neuroses could really be traced back to just sexual repression or trauma.
That independent streak is what makes him so compelling.
Yeah.
I always questioning, always pushing the boundaries.
Definitely. And that eventually led to their dramatic break, didn't it?
It did. It's almost like those two personalities from his childhood were at play again.
Oh, interesting.
On one hand, you've got Jung's scientific side, drawn to the rigor of Freud's theories.
Yeah.
But then there's that intuitive side, always pushing back, sensing there's more to the story.
Right.
That conflict, that tension, that's ultimately what led him to develop his own school of thought.
Analytical psychology.
Yeah. But before that, there was this specific incident, a dream, actually, that Jung shared with Freud.
Oh, what happened?
Well, Freud refused to offer his own personal interpretation of it. Like, he wouldn't touch the subjective or emotional aspect.
He was sticking to pure science.
Exactly. And this really bothered Jung, who believed that the personal context was essential for understanding the unconscious.
It's like Freud was saying, stick to the facts, leave your personal baggage out of it.
Right. But for Jung, that personal stuff was the key.
So from this point on, Jung's own dream imagery starts to get even richer, even more symbolic, right?
Yeah. Remember that dream he describes about the 3-story house?
Yeah, that's a wild one.
It's like a map of the psyche, isn't it? The different levels of the house, the descent into the basement, it all points towards the layered nature of consciousness, from everyday awareness down to the darkest corners of the unconscious.
And it's not just the imagery, it's that feeling, right? That sense of exploring something totally uncharted.
Exactly. And then there's that even weirder dream about the prehistoric landscape with those primordial figures.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorites. It's like he's tapping into something ancient, something beyond just personal experience.
That dream was huge for Jung. It pointed toward this concept of a collective unconscious,
Huh?
a reservoir of universal archetypes and symbols that we all share as humans.
So not just our own personal memories, but like the echoes of human experience itself, woven into the very fabric of our
A
minds.
mind-blowing, right?
Yeah.
And then he dreams of this wise old man and a young girl, Elijah and Salome.
Those figures, they keep popping up throughout his life, don't they?
Yeah, Jung saw them as personifications of these opposing forces within us.
Mm.
Wisdom and desire, reason and instinct.
It's interesting how these archetypal energies play out, not just in our dreams, but in our waking lives, too.
Right. Like think about the people you're drawn to, the conflicts you face. Are those just personal quirks? Or are they echoes of these deeper patterns?
Whoa, I never thought about it like that.
And it gets weirder. Jung starts encountering these figures in his waking life, too.
Seriously?
Yeah, like Philemon, the wise old man with bullhorns. He became a sort of spiritual guide for Jung.
That's wild.
And then there's that incredible synchronicity with the dead kingfisher.
Wait, remind me about that one.
Jung dreams of a kingfisher. Then he finds one, dead, in his garden.
Whoa, that's freaky.
It's like the lines between the inner and outer world are blurring.
What do you make of those kinds of synchronicities? Pure chance? Or something more?
Honestly, I don't know. But they definitely make you question our whole understanding of reality, don't they?
Totally.
And for Jung, these experiences were proof that the unconscious wasn't just personal, but something that connected us to this larger web.
But as he went deeper into this web, things got a little, well, a little darker, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Jung started having these intense visions, almost apocalyptic oceans of blood, flooded cities,
Whoa.
this overwhelming sense of doom, and all of this before World War I even broke out.
It's like he was tapping into the collective anxieties of humanity, like a premonition of the horrors to come.
Talk about a heavy burden to carry,
Yeah.
right? And it really pushed him to explore the shadow side of things.
The darker, more destructive side of the unconscious.
He even had a vision of descending into this cosmic abyss, and there he met these figures again, a wise old man and a young girl, representing those primal energies, the wise old sage and the anima.
It seems like he was constantly grappling with these opposing forces within himself, always trying to find that balance.
It's like he was mapping out this new territory, not just of the psyche, but of human experience itself.
And through that process, he realized he couldn't just go back to the way things were.
He had to find a way to integrate these powerful, unconscious experiences into his life and his work.
That need for integration, for wholeness, it's at the core of Jung's psychology, isn't it?
Totally. He understood that we can't just repress or ignore the unconscious. We have to find a way to make peace with it.
I feel like that message resonates even more today, you know?
Oh, yeah, for sure. We're constantly bombarded with information, trying to project this perfect image of ourselves.
Right, but what about those deeper parts? The dreams, the fears, the desires that we try so hard to hide?
Jung was basically saying, hey, bring that stuff into the light. Don't be afraid of it. He saw the unconscious not as something scary, but as a source of wisdom and creative potential.
But that integration, it's not always easy, is it?
Definitely not. He needed a new framework, a new language to understand this whole process.
And that's where alchemy comes in, right?
Bingo. He saw all these parallels between the alchemist's quest for transformation and his own explorations of the unconscious.
It's like they were both searching for that magic formula to turn base metal into gold, but not in a literal sense, of course.
Yeah, exactly. They were both trying to transform the raw material of the unconscious into something more refined, more whole.
It's like he found this ancient blueprint for the process of individuation, that journey toward wholeness and self-realization.
And that connection to alchemy, it really influenced his later work.
But it wasn't just theoretical for him.
Oh, no, not at all.
He needed a space to actually, embody this process of transformation.
And that's where his famous tower at Bollingen comes into the picture.
It wasn't just a retreat. It was like this physical manifestation of his inner world.
And get this, he built it himself.
Wow, I didn't know that.
It was really important for him to create this space with his own hands.
And he chose to build it near water, right? Which seems significant given how prominent water was in his early memories.
Oh, absolutely. And he lived there without any modern conveniences, chopping wood, pumping water, the whole 9 yards. It was almost like a ritual, a way to connect with a more primal way of being.
Like grounding himself in the physical world while simultaneously exploring the depths of his psyche.
Exactly.
Wow.
And in that solitude, he kept wrestling with those big questions. The nature of the soul, the meaning of death, our place in the universe.
It's like he was building a bridge between the ancient and the modern, the personal and the universal.
And his insights, they were truly groundbreaking. but I think we'll have to save those for the next part of our deep dive.
Yes, stick with us as we explore Jung's later years and the incredible legacy he left behind. So we left off with Jung at his tower, right? Like really wrestling with these huge questions about the soul, death, our place in the whole universe.
And it's not just thinking about these things,
Mhm.
He's not just reading about them in books. He wants to actually experience them.
He was all about that direct, embodied exploration, wasn't he? Not just theories.
Exactly. And at Bollingen, he really goes deep into these mysteries, especially like the nature of death and the afterlife.
And he had some pretty intense experiences of his own, near-death experiences, visions, and he interprets those through Eastern philosophy, Hinduism, Buddhism, all that.
I mean, think about it. A leading Western psychologist embracing Eastern concepts like reincarnation. It really shows you how open he was,
Mm.
always willing to challenge conventional thinking.
Totally. But he saw hints of the soul closer to home, too, in those precognitive dreams he describes.
Oh, yeah. The ones where he literally foresaw people's deaths before they
Well,
happened.
those are some seriously chilling accounts. It's like getting a peek into this realm beyond our normal understanding of time and stuff.
Definitely makes you question things.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just those dreams either. He also wrote about people's unconscious experiences in comas.
Like suggesting consciousness can continue even when the body's totally unresponsive.
Yeah. Does that, challenge how we define being alive? It's a big question.
It definitely makes you think. Jung believed the psyche isn't limited the way our physical bodies are. Like, it can work outside of space and time.
And tap into these realms we can barely comprehend.
Remember that crazy dream he had about, those metallic discs coming down from the sky?
Oh, yeah, that one was wild. It's like he's envisioning this connection,
Yeah.
between the individual psyche and this bigger cosmic order.
Like we're all plugged into this vast network of consciousness.
Exactly. And that image, it really gets at his idea of the self, that archetype of wholeness.
That encompasses both the conscious and unconscious, right?
Yeah. Like Jung was saying, maybe our individual journeys are somehow tied to the whole evolution of the universe.
That's a mind-blowing thought.
And it's that drive, that push towards wholeness and individuation that he saw as our ultimate goal.
But it's not just about personal growth, is it? It's about connecting to something bigger.
Something transcendent, yeah. He believed our individual journey, that individuation thing, it's also a reflection of humanity's evolution as a whole.
He saw the potential for us to become, more aware, more connected.
But also the dangers of neglecting our shadow side.
Yeah, especially after living through those really dark times. 2 world wars, the rise of totalitarian regimes.
He saw that as the shadow running wild,
Yeah.
like a warning about what happens when we don't do that inner work.
Right, and how our personal struggles, our imbalances, they can actually contribute to global unrest
He felt like modern society was just too focused on the rational, the material stuff.
at the expense of the spiritual, the symbolic.
And that throws everything out of whack, leading to a sense of, meaninglessness and despair.
That's something a lot of people can relate to these days, I think.
Oh, absolutely. We're always bombarded with information, striving for success, but feeling lost and disconnected.
Like we've forgotten how to nourish our souls.
And Jung was saying, go back to that ancient wisdom. Rediscover those myths and symbols that connect us to something deeper.
He was calling for this new kind of spirituality.
One that's not based on blind faith, but a deep understanding of the human psyche and our place in the cosmos.
His work feels more relevant now than ever.
Totally. In a world with climate change, political division, all these anxieties, Jung's giving us a way to navigate it.
Like a map of the inner world, right?
He reminds us that this journey toward wholeness, it's a process. It never really ends.
And it takes courage, honesty, facing those shadows.
Not just within ourselves, but in the world around us, too.
It's not about reaching some perfect state of enlightenment.
It's about embracing everything, light and dark, and using that awareness to create a more just and compassionate world.
So what does all this mean for you, dear listener? Jung's life, his work, it's a challenge. A call to explore your own depths.
To uncover those hidden parts of yourself that you might be afraid of.
But remember, it's not about judgment. It's about understanding.
Understanding who you are, what makes you tick, your unique contribution.
It's about embracing the fullness of yourself and using that to live a more meaningful life.
Like Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is being who you are.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the incredible world of Carl Jung.
We hope you found it insightful, thought-provoking, and maybe even a little transformative.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.